Hey friends, it's Jeff here with Mission Musician, and today I want to wrap up this little series we've been doing called Using Analog Emulations in Recording and Mixing. And I want to explain to you what I've done here really quick. I have rendered all of the analog emulation that we put on these tracks. I've actually rendered them to the tracks. Now, I was going to use commit the feature in Pro Tools, but I decided against it because I had all of my analog emulation. If you remember, I had a kicks bus and a snare bus, and I had at least 2 kicks running to the kick bus and 3 snares running to the snare bus, a snare top, a snare bottom, and a sample. So it was, I would have had to go back into each one of these tracks and put the analog emulation on each one individual. So instead of doing that, I bounced these 2 tracks down with the analog emulation on it, okay? And then the rest of them, I just rendered it using Audio Suite. Excuse me. So you'll see here, there are no plugins. It's already been rendered. All the analog emulation has been rendered down to these tracks, except for the background vocals. And the reason why I did not do the background vocals is because there's about 15 background vocal tracks. There's like 6 routed to this one, 4 routed to this one, and a few others routed to this one. And so it's just way too much to go through and do each one of those. So I'm going to leave the analog emulation that we created for the vocal bus, or I'm sorry, for the background vocal bus, right on this here. And then I'll just add my EQ and stuff below it. Okay, so then what I did was I bounced down a version of the song raw with no plugins on it at all. Actually, I did that before I did any commit or anything like that. I just bypassed all the plugins and bounced it down. And it's worth noting that before I committed anything, I saved the session. Let's see here. I saved the session as wanted post-commit or wanted pre-commit, and then after I committed them, I saved it as wanted post-commit, so I can always go back to the original files. Okay. So now I'm going to tell you up front, when I play these back, there is not like a huge mind-blowing difference. But there is a difference, and it's a definite difference to the good. In other words, to me, it sounds fuller with the analog emulation. It sounds warmer. It sounds a little bit more punchy. That could be due to the compression that we added. The guitars move forward. The bass is fuller. The kick drum is rounder. The snare drum is a little bit fatter. And it overall sounds better to me. Now, again, it is not like a major night and day difference. But if you think about mixing, it's all these little tiny moves that you make along the way that add up to an impactful, warm, punchy, good mix. So, to me, this was definitely worth doing, and I'm probably going to continue doing my mixes like this from now on because I just like what it does. But let me explain a few things to you before we play this back. I know you're sitting there going, just push play. I know, I get it. But if I don't explain to you, you'll wonder why one sounds louder than the other when it actually isn't. And I'm going to actually prove that to you in a minute. So the one that's the emulation, this red one here, this has the emulation printed to the mix. It sounds louder. And the reason why it sounds louder is because there's compression on the vocals, there's compression on the snare, compression on the bass. But then when you go down to this one, it kind of sinks down, and the vocals are kind of a little bit all over. The snare's not hitting solid every time. The bass isn't held up by compression. So that's why it sounds a little bit louder. And I'm going to prove to you that, and I'm going to show you this track is actually a tad bit louder than this one. So let's do that right now. I'm going to open a session, or I'm sorry, I'm going to open up Audio Suite, and I'm going to go to Other, and I'm going to go to this plugin called Gain. And I'm going to set it on RMS, and that's going to measure the average volume of the track. All right, so this is the Emulation track, and let's analyze this. So it's at negative 25.4. All right, so let's analyze the one with no plugins on it. I'm gonna click Analyze here, and it's actually louder. It's negative 24.9. So in reality, this mix is about a half a dB louder than this mix. All right, and let's go ahead and measure the peak as well. So let me analyze this. All right, so it's negative 3.6. And let me analyze the peak of the emulated one. And so the peaks are actually, this one's actually quieter. It peaks at negative 5.1, so that's almost a 2 dB difference in the peak. So we're controlling dynamics with the analog emulation, well, with the compression that we put on. So let's play through this, and I want you to listen and judge for yourself what you think. So the blue track is the static mix with no plugins, and the red track is the analog emulation. So here we go. All right, so this analog emulation is creating harmonics and saturation and all other kinds of cool stuff to give this track a vibe. Now, when it went to the blue track, it lacked for me. It felt underwhelming. And by no means does the analog emulated track sound like a finished mix, because it's not. We haven't even mixed it at all yet. As a matter of fact, I'm going to create a mixing series on this song. The band has given me permission to do so, so I'm going to, which is kind of why I'm creating these 3 videos ahead of time, so I can kind of show everybody, I can give a link to show everybody what I did before I actually started mixing. Okay, so on your next mix, give analog emulation a shot. If you don't like it, fine. I find that most people who mix rock and hard rock and maybe even some metal and maybe even pop generally like analog emulation. If you want a cleaner mix, like say jazz or maybe even a dance tune, you might not want to use analog emulation. Those aren't really my genres that I generally deal in. If you want a cleaner mix, then you might not want to use analog emulation. But I like all the vibe that this stuff gives to these tracks. So anyway, I don't want to get this video to get crazy long with me rambling. So let's just listen to this very end part one more time. I'm going to start with the analog emulate, and actually no, I'm going to start with the blue track here. Yeah, so that's definitely adding some good stuff. Before I even start mixing the song, I'm already at a better starting point. Okay? So that's all for now. If you like these kind of videos, please subscribe. I'll put a link up on the screen. Also, don't forget to like the actual video if you like it. If not, don't like it then. And then finally, you can get my free bundle over at missionmusician.com. And it's got video tutorials on EQing, compression, and Pro Tools. If you want to get that, it's free of charge, no strings attached. That's all for now. Look forward to seeing you in another video real soon. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.